He never knew why his girlfriend's dog hated him, especially whenever he kissed her, until their wedding day when he walked in on them doing something unimaginable. What happened next will leave you speechless. James and Sarah. They'd been together for 3 years, and by all accounts, they were the perfect couple. James was successful, kind-hearted, and completely devoted to Sarah. He'd do anything for her, buy her anything she wanted, and treated her like absolute royalty. Sarah seemed to appreciate it all. She was beautiful, charming, and everyone who met them said they were meant to be together. But there was one thing that always bothered James. Sarah's dog, a large German shepherd named Rex, absolutely despised him. From the very first day James met Sarah, Rex would growl whenever James got too close. If James tried to kiss Sarah, Rex would bark aggressively and sometimes even snap at him. If James stayed the night, Rex would sit outside the bedroom door, whining and scratching like he was trying to protect Sarah from some terrible danger. James brought this up to Sarah countless times. "Why does your dog hate me so much?" he'd ask. "I've never done anything to hurt him. I bring him treats. I try to be gentle, but he acts like I'm some kind of threat." Sarah would always laugh it off. "Oh, Rex is just protective," she'd say with a wave of her hand. "He's been with me since he was a puppy. He probably just sees you as competition for my attention. Don't take it personally, babe. He'll warm up to you eventually." But Rex never warmed up to James. If anything, the dog's behavior got worse as time went on. During romantic dinners, Rex would position himself between James and Sarah, staring at James with what could only be described as pure hatred. When James proposed, Rex actually tried to knock the ring box out of his hands. Sarah thought it was hilarious. James was starting to think the dog was possessed. Friends and family noticed it too. "That dog really doesn't like you," James's best friend Mark would joke. "Maybe he knows something you don't." James would laugh along, but deep down, those comments bothered him. What could a dog possibly know that he didn't? Sarah loved him, didn't she? They were planning a wedding, talking about their future together, making all these beautiful plans. Rex was just an overly protective pet who couldn't handle sharing his owner's attention. As the wedding day approached, James decided he needed to have a serious conversation with Sarah about Rex's behavior. They were going to be married soon, and he couldn't spend the rest of his life being terrorized by his wife's dog in his own home. "Sarah, we need to talk about Rex," James said one evening as they planned seating arrangements for the reception. "His behavior toward me is getting out of control. Yesterday, he actually growled at me when I tried to hold your hand on the couch." Sarah looked up from her wedding planning binders, her expression suddenly serious. "What are you suggesting, James?" "I'm not suggesting we get rid of him," James said quickly, seeing the defensive look in her eyes. "I love that you love Rex, but maybe we could get him some training, or at least set some boundaries. I can't have a dog attacking me in my own home after we're married." Sarah's face softened, and she reached over to take James's hand. "You're right, honey. I'm sorry Rex has been such a problem. He's just been with me through some really tough times, you know? Before I met you, he was basically my only companion. But you're going to be my husband, and that has to come first." James felt a wave of relief wash over him. Finally, they were going to address this issue like adults. "After the honeymoon," Sarah continued, "we'll look into some training programs, maybe even a pet behaviorist. I want our marriage to start off on the right foot, and that means Rex needs to learn to respect you as part of our family." James kissed her forehead. "Thank you for understanding. I know how much Rex means to you." "You mean more," Sarah said, smiling up at him. "You're going to be my husband. Rex is just a dog." Those words should have made James feel better. But something about the way Sarah said "just a dog" bothered him. Rex wasn't just a dog to Sarah. Rex was her baby, her constant companion, her most precious possession. She'd never spoken about Rex so dismissively before, but James pushed the thought away. Maybe Sarah was finally starting to see things from his perspective. The week before the wedding was a whirlwind of final preparations. Sarah seemed more excited than ever. constantly texting and making phone calls about last-minute details. She was glowing, practically bouncing with energy every time James saw her. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and James found himself getting caught up in her excitement. I can't believe we're actually doing this," Sarah would say, throwing her arms around James's neck. "In just a few days, I'm going to be Mrs. Sarah Mitchell. Doesn't that sound perfect?" James would smile and hold her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume, feeling like the luckiest man alive. This beautiful, vibrant woman was going to be his wife. All those months of dealing with Rex's attitude would be worth it once they were married and settled into their new life together. The night before the wedding, James decided to stay at his own apartment to honor the tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony. As he packed his bag and prepared to leave Sarah's place, Rex sat in the corner of the room, watching him with those intense, knowing eyes. "Tomorrow's the big day, buddy," James said to the dog, feeling generous in his happiness. "I know we've had our differences, but we're going to be family now. What do you say we start fresh?" Rex tilted his head, and for a moment, James thought he saw something almost like sadness in the dog's expression. But then Rex turned away, padding over to Sarah's bedroom door and lying down in his usual protective position. James shook his head and grabbed his keys. Tomorrow was going to be the best day of his life, and nothing, not even an overprotective German shepherd, was going to ruin it for him. If only he knew what was waiting for him at that hotel room. The wedding day arrived with perfect weather. The sun was shining, birds were singing, and everything seemed to be falling into place exactly as Sarah had planned. James woke up in his apartment feeling nervous but excited. Today was the day he'd been dreaming about for months. He got ready carefully, putting on his crisp white shirt and adjusting his tie multiple times in the mirror. His best man Mark arrived early to help him with the final touches, and together they drove to the luxury hotel where the ceremony would take place. The hotel was magnificent. Sarah had spared no expense in choosing the venue. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, fresh flowers decorated every surface, and the entire place looked like something out of a fairy tale. James felt a surge of pride knowing that soon he'd be married to the woman who had orchestrated all of this beauty. "You ready for this, man?" Mark asked, straightening James's boutonniere. "More than ready," James replied, his voice filled with confidence. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." What James didn't know was that Sarah had arrived at the hotel the night before with Rex, just as they'd planned. She'd wanted to stay at the venue to oversee the final preparations and make sure everything was perfect for their big day. It seemed like a romantic gesture, and James had thought it was sweet that she cared so much about every detail. The morning of the wedding, while James was getting ready at his apartment, Sarah was in her hotel suite, surrounded by her bridesmaids and getting pampered by a team of hair and makeup artists. She looked radiant, glowing with an excitement that seemed almost too intense for the occasion. "You look absolutely stunning," her maid of honor Jessica gushed. "James is going to lose his mind when he sees you walking down that aisle." Sarah smiled at herself in the mirror, admiring the way her wedding dress hugged her figure perfectly. "I can hardly believe this day is finally here," she said. "Everything is working out exactly the way I planned." There was something about the way she said, "exactly the way I planned," that made Jessica pause for a moment, but she brushed off the strange feeling. Brides were always a little intense on their wedding day. It was perfectly normal. Meanwhile, James was at the hotel, getting ready in his own suite with his groomsmen. The guys were joking around, sharing stories, and trying to calm James's pre-wedding nerves. Everything felt normal, celebratory, exactly the way a wedding morning should feel. "I still can't believe that dog of hers hates you so much," Mark said, laughing as he adjusted his own tie. "What do you think Rex is going to do when you two start living together full-time?" James shrugged, feeling confident about the conversation he'd had with Sarah the week before. Sarah's going to get him some training after the honeymoon. She finally understands that his behavior isn't acceptable anymore. "Good for you for putting your foot down," another groomsman chimed in. "A man's got to be the king of his own castle, Even if there's a German shepherd who disagrees. They all laughed, but James felt a small knot of anxiety in his stomach. He hoped Rex wouldn't cause any drama during the ceremony. The last thing he wanted was for Sarah's dog to disrupt their perfect wedding day. As the morning progressed, James found himself thinking about Sarah more and more. He missed her, even though he'd only been away from her for one night. The tradition of not seeing the bride before the ceremony seemed silly now. All he wanted was to hold her hand and tell her how much he loved her. Around noon, James decided he couldn't wait any longer. He knew he wasn't supposed to see Sarah before the ceremony, but surely a quick surprise visit wouldn't hurt anything. Maybe he could just pop by her suite to give her a small gift he'd been saving, or simply to tell her how excited he was to marry her. The more James thought about it, the more the idea appealed to him. Sarah loved surprises, and she'd probably think it was romantic that he couldn't stay away from her even for one morning. He could just slip in, give her a quick kiss, and slip back out. No one would even know he'd broken tradition. James told Mark he needed to run a quick errand and would be back in plenty of time for the ceremony preparations. Mark seemed a little confused, but didn't ask too many questions. Grooms were always nervous and unpredictable on their wedding day. James made his way through the hotel corridors, his heart beating faster with each step. He was so excited to see Sarah's face when he surprised her. She'd probably squeal with delight and playfully scold him for breaking tradition, but she'd love the romantic gesture. When he reached Sarah's suite, James paused outside the door for a moment, listening. He could hear voices inside, but they seemed quieter than he'd expected. Maybe the bridesmaids had stepped out, and Sarah was just relaxing before the big event. James raised his hand to knock on the door, but then he heard something that made him freeze. It was Sarah's voice, but she was talking on the phone, and her tone was completely different from anything he'd ever heard from her before. "I can't believe we're actually pulling this off," Sarah was saying, her voice low and conspiratorial. James has no idea what's coming. James felt his stomach drop. What did she mean, pulling this off? And why did she sound so secretive? He pressed his ear closer to the door, his heart hammering in his chest. Maybe he was misunderstanding. Maybe she was talking about some kind of surprise for him. "Shay, the plan is working perfectly," Sarah continued. "He's been so focused on Rex's behavior that he hasn't noticed anything else. Poor, stupid James. He actually thinks that dog hates him for no reason." James's blood turned cold. The way Sarah said, "Poor, stupid James," made his skin crawl. There was a cruelty in her voice that he'd never heard before, a coldness that seemed to come from a completely different person than the woman he thought he was about to marry. "Rex has been the perfect cover," Sarah went on, and James could hear her pacing around the room. "Every time James gets suspicious about anything, Rex creates a distraction. The dog's been trained to act aggressive toward James from day one. It's been so easy to manipulate the situation." James felt like the floor was falling out from under him. Rex had been trained to hate him? The dog's behavior wasn't natural protectiveness or jealousy. It was deliberate. But why? What possible reason could Sarah have for wanting her dog to terrorize her own boyfriend? "Once we're married and the paperwork is signed, we can move to phase 2, Sarah said, her voice getting more excited. "James has no idea that I've been planning this for over a year. He's so trusting, so naive. He actually believes I love him." The words hit James like a physical blow. She didn't love him. Then what was all of this? What had the last 3 years been about? Sarah's voice grew softer, more intimate, and James realized she must be talking to someone special, someone she actually cared about. "I know, baby. I miss you too," she cooed. "But we have to be patient just a little bit longer. After today, James will be my husband, which means I'll have legal access to everything he owns. His business, his properties, his bank accounts, everything. And the best part is, he's been so generous during our engagement that he's already put my name on most of his assets." James gripped the doorframe to steady himself. His business? His properties? He had been generous with Sarah, adding her name to various accounts and investments because he trusted her completely. He'd thought it was romantic, a way of showing her that he saw their futures as permanently intertwined. Dakshaniya Tuksa. The prenup protects him from losing everything in a divorce, Sarah continued, but it doesn't protect him from what happens if something tragic occurs during the marriage, especially if his loving wife is there to inherit everything and comfort his grieving family. James felt sick. What did she mean by something tragic? Was Sarah planning to hurt him? Was his life actually in danger? Don't worry, Sarah said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. I've got it all figured out. James trusts me completely. He'll never see it coming. James's hands were shaking as he stepped back from the door. His mind was racing, trying to process what he'd just heard. The woman he loved, the woman he was about to marry in just a few hours, was planning something terrible. But what exactly? And who was she talking to? He pressed his ear back to the door, desperate to understand the full scope of whatever Sarah was plotting. I love you too, Marcus, Sarah said softly. I can't wait until we can finally be together without all this pretending. James has been such a useful stepping stone, but I'm so tired of acting like I care about him. Marcus. James felt his heart shatter. Sarah had been cheating on him this entire time, but it was worse than just an affair. This Marcus person was clearly involved in whatever scheme Sarah had cooked up. The timing has to be perfect, Sarah continued. We can't rush this part. James needs to believe everything is normal until after the ceremony. Once we're legally married, then we can start phase 2. Phase 2. James remembered her mentioning that before. What was phase 2? Have you been taking care of your end of things? Sarah asked. There was a pause as she listened to Marcus's response. Good. And you're sure the substance won't be detected? Perfect. James is so trusting. He'll never question anything I give him. Substance. James felt a chill run down his spine. Were they planning to poison him? Drug him? His mind immediately went to all the times Sarah had brought him drinks, cooked him meals, surprised him with his favorite snacks. Had she been testing different methods? Had she already been slowly poisoning him? Rex has been the perfect accomplice, Sarah laughed, and James could hear genuine affection in her voice for the first time during this conversation. That dog is so smart. Every time James started getting suspicious about my phone calls or my late nights out, Rex would create a scene. James became so focused on the dog's behavior that he stopped paying attention to mine. The pieces were starting to fall into place, and James felt sick to his stomach. Rex hadn't been protecting Sarah from James. Rex had been protecting James from Sarah. The dog had been trying to warn him all along. Every growl, every bark, every aggressive display had been Rex's attempt to keep James away from danger. I actually feel a little bad about Rex, Sarah continued. After today, we won't need him anymore. He knows too much, and he's too attached to his old routine. We'll have to get rid of him along with James. Get rid of Rex, too? James felt a surge of anger that surprised him. He'd spent months being frustrated with that dog, but now he realized Rex had been the only one trying to protect him. Rex had sensed something was wrong from the very beginning, and James had been too blind to see it. Don't worry about the guests, Sarah said. Everyone will be so shocked by the tragedy that they won't ask too many questions. A young husband, overcome with excitement on his wedding day, has a heart attack during the reception. It happens more often than people think, and his devoted wife will be there to hold his hand as he passes away. Heart attack. James's blood ran cold. Sarah was planning to kill him at their own wedding reception, in front of all their friends and family. The substance Marcus had prepared must be something that would cause cardiac arrest, something that would look natural, especially in a man who was experiencing the stress and excitement of his wedding day. The insurance payout alone will be worth millions, Sarah continued, plus all his business assets, the properties, the investments. By this time next year, we'll be living in that beach house we talked about, and no one will ever suspect a thing. James felt like he was going to be sick. This wasn't just about money, though that was clearly a huge motivator. Sarah had been planning his murder for over a year. She'd been pretending to love him, planning a future with him, all while orchestrating his death. "I should go," Sarah said. "The makeup artist will be back soon, and I need to look like a blushing bride. See you at the reception, baby. Tonight, we celebrate the beginning of our real life together." James heard footsteps approaching the door and quickly moved away, ducking around a corner just as Sarah opened the door to let someone out. He caught a glimpse of a man he didn't recognize, tall and dark-haired, wearing a hotel staff uniform. Marcus, presumably, the man who had been helping Sarah plan James's murder. As Marcus walked away, James remained hidden, his mind reeling. What was he supposed to do now? Call the police? But what would he tell them? That his fiancée was planning to poison him at their wedding. He had no proof except what he'd overheard, and Sarah was clever enough to deny everything. Cancel the wedding? Disappear? Run away and never look back? The thought was tempting, but James realized that wouldn't solve anything. Sarah would just find another way to get to his assets, and she'd probably go after Rex, too. The dog who had been trying to save his life didn't deserve to die for Sarah's greed. No, James decided. He wasn't going to run. He was going to expose Sarah for exactly what she was, right in front of everyone who mattered. If she wanted to play games, he'd show her what a real game looked like. James made his way back to his suite, his mind already working on a plan. Mark was waiting for him, looking concerned. "Dude, where have you been? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I'm fine," James said, forcing a smile. "Just pre-wedding nerves, you know?" But James was far from fine. He was angry, heartbroken, and determined. Sarah thought she was so clever, manipulating him for over a year, using Rex as a distraction while she planned his murder. She had no idea that her perfect plan was about to backfire spectacularly. "Mark," James said, his voice steady and calm, "I need you to help me with something, and I need you to trust me completely, no matter how crazy it sounds." Mark studied James's face, clearly sensing that something serious was happening. "Of course, man. What do you need?" James pulled out his phone and started scrolling through his contacts. He was going to need a few allies for what he was planning, people who could help him gather evidence, people who could be trusted to keep quiet until the right moment. "First, I need you to call Detective Rodriguez. Remember him from college? He owes me a favor." James's fingers were flying across his phone screen. "Tell him I need a discreet favor at my wedding today. Something involving recording equipment." "His recording equipment?" Mark looked confused. "James, what's going on?" I can't explain everything right now," James said. "But Sarah isn't who we think she is. She's been planning something terrible, and I need to catch her in the act." Mark's expression grew serious. "Are you in danger?" "I was," James said grimly. "But not anymore. Sarah made one crucial mistake. She assumed I was too stupid and trusting to ever figure out what she was doing. She was wrong." As James continued making calls and sending texts, his anger was transforming into something more powerful: determination. Sarah wanted to play the role of grieving widow? Fine. But first, she was going to play the role of exposed criminal, right in front of everyone she'd been planning to deceive. The wedding was still going to happen. The guests were still going to gather. The music was still going to play. And Sarah was still going to walk down that aisle in her beautiful white dress. But instead of ending with "I do," this wedding was going to end with handcuffs. Rex had been trying to warn him all along. The least James could do was make sure that loyal dog got to see his owner's true nature exposed for everyone to witness. Today wasn't going to be the day James died. Today was going to be the day Sarah's carefully constructed lies came crashing down around her. And James was going to make sure everyone had a front row seat to watch it happen. The ceremony was scheduled to begin in 3 hours. James had a lot of work to do. But for the first time since overhearing that phone call, he felt like he had control of the situation. Sarah thought she was the only one who could manipulate and scheme. She was about to learn that her poor, stupid James was much smarter than she'd ever given him credit for. This wedding was still going to be unforgettable, just not in the way Sarah had planned. The first call James made was to his lawyer, David Chen. David had handled all of James's business contracts and had become a trusted friend over the years. David, I need you to meet me at the Grandview Hotel in 2 hours, James said, keeping his voice low. Bring everything related to the assets I've shared with Sarah. Bank accounts, property deeds, business partnerships, all of it. James, it's your wedding day, David said, sounding confused. Is everything okay? No, everything is not okay. Sarah has been planning to kill me for my money, and I need to make sure she can't access a single penny of it. James could hear David's sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. I'm going to expose her at the wedding, but first I need to protect my assets. Jesus, James, are you serious? Should we call the police? We will, but I need evidence first. Just trust me and bring those documents. We're going to reverse every financial decision I've made with Sarah over the past year. The second call was to Detective Rodriguez, his old college roommate who now worked for the local police department. Rodriguez owed James a favor after James had helped him through a messy divorce by providing free legal advice through David. Rodriguez, I need recording equipment at my wedding today. Hidden cameras, audio devices, whatever you can get me without a warrant. What kind of trouble are you in, James? Not the kind where my bride is planning to murder me at the reception. I overheard her talking about it this morning. She's been working with someone named Marcus, and they're planning to poison me during the celebration. Rodriguez was quiet for a long moment. James, if you're serious about this, we need to handle it properly. I can't just wire you up based on a suspicion. It's not a suspicion. I heard her planning my death. She's been using her dog to distract me while she set everything up. Look, I know how crazy this sounds, but I need you to trust me. Can you at least have some backup nearby? Plainclothes officers at the reception? Just give me the details. If what you're saying is true, we need to be smart about this. James explained everything he'd overheard, and Rodriguez agreed to position undercover officers at the wedding venue. They couldn't arrest Sarah based on overheard conversations, but they could be ready to intervene if she actually attempted to harm James. The third call was to his tech-savvy cousin Danny, who worked in cybersecurity. Danny, I need you to hack into Sarah's phone and computer. I know it's illegal, but she's planning to kill me and I need evidence. Dude, what? Are you being serious right now? She's dead serious. She's been texting someone named Marcus about poisoning me at my own wedding reception. I need those text messages, emails, anything that proves what she's planning. Danny was quiet for a moment. If she's really planning to hurt you, then screw the legal implications. Send me her phone number and any email addresses you know. I'll see what I can find. While James was making his calls, Mark sat in stunned silence, trying to process what his best friend was telling him. James, this is insane. Are you absolutely sure about this? Sarah seems so normal, so in love with you. That's what made her so dangerous, James said bitterly. She's been playing a role for 3 years. The perfect girlfriend, the devoted fiancée. Meanwhile, she's been slowly positioning herself to inherit everything I own. What about Rex? You said the dog was trying to warn you. James felt a pang of guilt. Rex has been trying to protect me this entire time. Sarah trained him to act aggressive toward me so I'd be distracted by his behavior instead of paying attention to hers. That dog probably saved my life by making me suspicious enough to go to her room this morning. What started as a perfect wedding day became the most spectacular takedown in history. James exposed Sarah's murder plot right there at the altar, with police waiting in the wings and every guest watching her world collapse. Rex, the dog everyone thought was the problem, turned out to be the hero who saved James's life. Sometimes the ones trying to protect us are the ones we least expect. Trust your instincts, watch for the warning signs, and remember that true character reveals itself when people think no one is watching.